Here we go. Top takeaways from today's Cowboys practice in Oxnard, California, from the Holiday Inn in Ventura, about 5 miles from the Cowboys practice facility in Oxnard. We were on the practice fields today. New Bear sunburn proves it. But what we saw is awesome today. There's some massive differences from how Cowboys camp ran under McCarthy and Garrett. I think it spells winning. Coach had to cuss the guys out again today. Why did it end with them running gassers? But more importantly, I'm going to actually make the case here for you. Schotty is going to be the coach that brings the Cowboys at least back to deep playoff runs. I'm believing in this guy more than ever. Tell us if you agree, disagree with that down in the comments below. Dak threw another pick. Yes, it was the usual suspect. We got top plays to react to, and as a matter of fact, you can go look in our YouTube shorts right now and take a look at about a dozen of the best plays of the day. But let's do this. Take it away, Jimmy.
The only thing else I got to say is, how about them Cowboys?
All right, yes, sir. I'm Gavin Dawson from 105.3 The Fans, G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 every weekday. And with me, as always, is the former all-academic lineman from Kentucky, New Bear Lesniewski. How the hell you doing, man?
I got to tell you, all my Kentucky guys are just giving me the business. Every time you say that, they just laugh, and they're sending me every emoji in the book. So they're listening. Thank you, guys. And I appreciate the shout-out at the top of every show. Yeah, this is great. I get to start my day looking into the Pacific Ocean and spend most of it watching some of the best in the business do what they do.
And let me tell you why I say that every day, right? Because I want people to know you're smarter than bleep, right? And I want them to know you played SEC football, right? Yeah. I want everybody tuning in knowing that I believe in my guy right here, and I'm excited to talk football with you. But let's just start with your big picture takeaway. What stood out to you today as you were taking in practice?
The number one thing's got to be the tempo.
Yeah.
I mean, conditioning within a practice, we were joking about it a couple shows ago, and it's one of the hardest things to do because in theory, right, you're working on getting in shape, gain speed, like play. And at this point in the season, you potentially sacrifice some of the execution, right? Because things can get sloppy real fast when you run out of gas.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that was really interesting to see today is they did a really nice job rotating players. They did a really nice job of changing groups. You saw guys go up to the ones, and you also saw guys, rally troops with the twos, and just a lot of speed, both sides of the ball, and then a lot of tempo, just getting in and out of stuff.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly why that is. Do you think they're going to want to try to play fast in games, or do you think they just want to prepare these guys to be football conditioned as possible to play all 4 quarters?
Well, a lot of it too is game condition specific. So you're talking about 2 minute. Let's make it really feel like 2 minutes. That when you're out there, you know what 17 seconds is, and if you can get that play off and spike it or run the field goal unit on or not, right? Like some of those things you have to actually really rep in order to be able to produce.
So what do you think of all the Schotty motions? I mean,
it's every play.
Yeah. I mean, so how is the coordination of every play? How are they doing?
The thing that I was really struck by today was how much in control Joe Milton seems to be. Checking, recheck, can, like all the different things that you see teams do on Sunday. He set and reset, just changing left to right, or even getting out of a bad play. Dak did it more throwing the ball. I think one of the Ceedee touchdowns that we'll show, that was a check. They literally switched. You can hear one of the guys in the stands kind of hollering about it and calling out that it's Ceedee's number because you're putting him at the apex as opposed to being the off guy who's maybe going to be the guy who tries to take someone away for someone else to make a play. And I really, really, really loved watching Joe Milton get in, get out, and then change things to put them in a position to succeed.
So you feel like the quarterbacks have a good grasp on what they're trying to install?
Yeah, there was actually some plays today where I was like, man, was that an RPO or was that just traditional PA, right? Like there was a lot of really slick ball handling. Really, there was only one, I think, fumbled snap the whole day, and Dak just kind of like walked away, and that was it. And they moved on to the next thing, and they just got it done.
We did a video about 3 weeks ago. You can check it out on Clayton Adams and, can the Cowboys steal Arizona's Smash Mouth secret? Maybe we'll link to it here to make it easy for you. But, a big topic there was how are these offensive linemen going to move in concert to bring all that motion to another level post-snap?
No false starts. Right. And no, it didn't seem like there wasn't any finger pointing saying, oh, hey, you were supposed to come off on, this linebacker, you were supposed to do. No one was pulling and running into each other. Right. There was no bad news Bears stuff to start with. But then inside the run game in particular, the quarterbacks were pretty clean. There were some free rushers off the edge. There was some really nice. Eberflus has some really nice disguises. He's got some automatics where you have, if the tight end is out or a running back is out wide and they motion back into phase, there's some automatic stuff that you can see where these guys are freed up, meaning the defenders are freed up to just turn loose and go hunt the quarterback. And that happened a couple of times today. And that's going to happen on Sunday. But the thing that was really neat, watching them get in and out was that there didn't seem to be a whole lot of mistakes.
That's awesome, dude. I mean, because we're just not even 2 weeks in,
Yeah.
right? And you've had OTAs, you've had minicamp, but to be at this point, cannot wait for joint practices, cannot wait for the preseason to see what else they can bring to the table. All right, let's start looking at some of the top plays here. And I'm pretty sure Dak and Ceedee had a miscommunication on this one, and no mistake is going unpunished right now from Elum. This guy is absolutely on fire.
There's an expectation. I mean, this is a trick 'em play, whether you call it sucker or whatever the element is, where you're running Turpin in motion. You're expecting eyes, you're expecting coverage, and the pump fake to kind of do its job. I think Dak expected him to be running free. I mean, he threw a lollipop. This was maybe the one or two plays that you look back for Dak and go, I wonder almost if they kind of told him to see if the defense could make a play or if the defense was going to, be awake and pay attention. And then, oh, by the way, let them go catch the ball.
It looked like CeeDee Lamb was supposed to have a deep comeback, and he just kept going.
Yeah.
So, hopefully they can get that ironed out. I would imagine, Dak and Ceedee aren't going to have too many of those, but I mean, you look at the last 2 or 3 years and there has been perhaps more of that than you would like.
Well, the reason I'm kind of tongue in cheek, joking that one of the things that you never really know, like if you're in a period, Dak might be being told, hey, if it's a busted play, see if the defense can make a play. That's all I'm saying. The miscommunication part of it though is if that's not being communicated to Dak or Joe or anybody, where you're saying, hey, if this is busted, like I talked about this with the Nealon pick a couple weeks ago, where it's like maybe they're saying, hey, Dak, if it's broken, let the defense make a play because they trust him not to do that in a game. But when you're doing,
that's some serious bail you're throwing for number 4. I'm sure his homers really appreciate you, Newberry. You're doing good work.
But the thing that's so funny about it is he really threw a ball where he expected CD to be free, almost like a coverage bust. It was a trick 'em and dick 'em kind of thing where Turpin in and of himself was supposed to be enough to camouflage, set up, and then bang, CD's off to the races. So, what'll be interesting to see is, that's going to be part of the in and out week to week. Turpin in motion, Turpin dictating, odd and even, Turpin dictating matchups, and then CD. They did it. Oh my God, they did it so much with CD today, which freed up GP because you can't double them both. And then when you put them both on the same side, it's like they're stacked. Whoever's over the top is going to beat his man, and whoever's in the flat's almost wide open, no matter what. And Dak was taking every chance that they were giving him.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of Dak. Let me say that, right? No disrespect by any commentary about what happens on the football field, but 2022 he led the NFL in picks, and last year he led the NFL in turnover-worthy plays. So I think how everything comes together with this offense, I don't think Joe Milton is a challenge for him.
Right. Well, the Joe Milton stuff too is you can tell it's a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Where it's like. I don't want to say it's half field read, like they're dumbing anything down for him, but it's clear that he's being told to play on time and on target.
Yeah. So he's not taking Dak Prescott's job, right? I don't want to be silly, but I do think, turnovers are a backbreaker. He did a great job at limiting them early in his career. He's got to get back to that this year. And we're seeing too many situations where he doesn't see a defensive back, he's not on the same page, or the accuracy isn't there. Like those are 3 ways.
Yeah. Sure, I see what you're saying. But I also like you said, we're 2 weeks in. I don't think they're saying, hey, when we get to these joint practices, hang one up there. But I do think they're saying we need to see if Kyrie can break on a ball.
And maybe they did say that, but I mean, Schotty benched him last year as the OC for throwing a single interception. I know he cares about this, and I would imagine that this has to be a point of emphasis to prove we can eliminate turnovers as much as possible here in Oxnard.
I think the big thing going forward is going to be the one of the shorts that we threw up was really just a quick, like a D4K in rhythm. And anything they did at the sticks, anything that they did in goal line situation in particular, where it was 3 or 5 and get the ball out, he didn't miss.
Okay, so let's go to the other part of this equation, which is Elum, and talk about not missing. This guy's, I think 2 picks in his 3 or 4 years in Buffalo. He has not been an interception guy in the NFL so far. He's certainly looking like that right now. So that's part of the path to victory. Now, we did hear today that maybe Diggs and Ravel could still be ready for week 1. That would be, I think, the biggest surprise out of anything I've seen in Oxnard. but that's still a ways out. So I don't know. Maybe by the time we get to week 1 or week 2, Kyrie Elum will be sitting on the bench, and when the bullets really start flying, you're going to see what other teams do to Elam. But I think now the narrative is in play that the trade and it being his last chance, he's in his mid-20s now. Maybe it motivated him with a sense of urgency to really, make sure he was doing everything in his power to have a great camp.
Eberflus wants his guys with their eyes on the ball. And when you have a guy who has his traits and really his ball skills, sometimes it just comes down to making the play. Early in his career in Buffalo, if he makes a pick six and he steps in front of one of those routes, coaches view him different, right? When you start making mistakes and then the expectation is that you're going to continue doing that, that's a different headspace to play.
So is this, are you saying that the Eberflus fit is unlocking what Elam's potential was on draft day?
Well, it's clear early. Defense is usually ahead of offense, right? Typically it takes the offense longer to get their stuff going in terms of rhythm and then plays off of plays, in-play adjustment. Whereas, like I was talking about earlier, where it's clear that Eberflus has got some serious, they're pages ahead on the install where they've got, flow rhythm blitzes, the same way that we were talking about, Dak hitting a stick route. And what you see from Elam and from these DBs is a lot of zone match and a lot of if this, then that, meaning if the outside receiver, who's really a tight end or a fullback, comes back in to be part of the pass protection scheme and there's an automatic blitz, their rotation changes. And so a guy who's maybe going to have the flat and be buzzing in coverage is now chasing the quarterback. Safety's got to screw in, right? Corner's got to rotate over. Like all those things happen in phase for the defense too. And that was glaringly apparent today that everyone knows where they're supposed to be. And so if you know where you're supposed to be and then you can get there because you have the physical tools and you're playing with your eyes on the ball, when that ball gets hung up, it's the same conversation we have about George Pickens' spin rate and trajectory, right? You use that ball as like a beach ball because now we're playing in a momentum-based conversation.
I love it, New Bear. Okay, let's go to the next play. I think this one open team. Javonte Williams getting loose.
It was nasty.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a really good friend who's a running backs coach at the high school level, and he was a running back at Kentucky. And when you start talking about, jump cuts and all the different things, you're going from this gap to that gap and what you have to do to stay in phase with your blockers, what you have to do to stay on time. We talk about on time and on target like it's just a quarterback thing. That's true with the backs and the blocking scheme. So when I sent some of the clips today of all three guys, he was impressed that, Javonte had the juice. He was impressed that, Blue has it, but he's willingly sticking it in there in between the tackles. They ran him between the tackles today with the ones, which was nice to see. And he's finishing every play. And then we posted one of the shorts of how slippery Sanders looks, where one of the things you talked about, yards before contact, we always focus on yards after catch or run after catch. Miles Sanders wasn't getting touched. He was running up the line or his own lineman's back, 7-8 yards downfield and then popping out. And when it's full speed, when it's full go, even if it's thud, and obviously when you're playing other teams and guys are coming with bad intent, and those guys are going low, maybe you get tripped up and it's a 5-yard gain. But there's stuff that's on tape from today where all three of these guys are potentially hitting their head on the goalpost.
Well, that sounds amazing. I think ideally you would have one running back who is so much better than everybody else in the league that you're just giving him the ball.
Sure.
And you're only taking him out to rest him and to keep him under, whatever your target carries is for the day. But I think the second best thing is having so many guys that everybody's fresh throughout the entire game.
18 weeks plus playoffs, right?
Yeah. And now we're not dependent on one guy staying healthy or one guy being able to do this or do that. I think you have a tremendous amount of versatility.
Yep.
I mean, how many guys do they really have that could play on Sundays? Probably 6 different running backs if you count Turpin.
You count Turpin. The thing that was so interesting to me about today wasn't even the Javonte Williams run. It was the screen. Because they had just run Blue right before the fight, right? Blue to brawl is what we posted.
Yeah.
And, Blue is going to look in the open field. You do swing screen to a guy who runs 4.28, 4.25. It's going to look great. And it's one-on-one and it's a race to the sideline and to the pylon. But what was really cool coming off of that was I had to look for a second because, 33 and 34, especially if you're on the far side of the quarterback. And I was like, oh, that's Javonte. And then you go, oh, is he in for pass pro? Is this going to be a deep shot? Because you're trying to, when you're filming, right, you're trying to project and say, oh, maybe this is Ferguson on a corner. Maybe this is Ceedee gets the go ball. And they ran what is basically like a play off of Max Pro. They ran a screen for Javonte that can project to be a huge part of this passing game where he's a really good pass protector. You see him as the third down back because he can protect Dak. But if he has juice to not just be a check down guy, oh, it's 3rd and 11 and they hit Javonte and it's a 5-yard and that's it. If he's got juice where they can run slip screens and do some fun stuff with him the same way that they can do with Blue, obviously Javonte's not a 4-2-5 guy. But if he can be a guy who can play with pace enough to go pick up a third down and steal a series here and there and keep something moving, I mean, that doesn't just make him RB1 front runner, potential bell cow back. That keeps him on the field on third down, not just to protect Dak, and that also means you're not bringing in Jaden Blue going, hey, 34's in, watch screen.
Yeah, I do trust Sean Payton, right? And I have a tremendous amount of respect for his offense, and I think the Broncos do have one of the best lines in the NFL. So one way of looking at it is he did not produce over 4 yards an attempt last year for Denver. Why is it going to change for the Cowboys? But this is what I love about this scheme. This scheme that Clayton Adams is bringing gives him a chance to get yards before contact,
Sure.
to not be battling at or behind the line of scrimmage, trying to find his hole. This offense is about giving players an opportunity to get in space while you've caught the defense off guard. So, and then I also, appreciated Brian's report about how Sean Payton does not believe maybe that Javonte has it in him durability-wise to be an every down guy. So how do you marry those two concepts? And it's, you give him a couple of series to start the game, right? You give him a couple of series to start the third, and then you see how it's impacting the
hot
defense.
Hand.
Yeah, you go from the hot hand for there. But to start out a game, exactly what you're talking about right now, if Javonte Williams is a threat, in the run game, and he had some runs last year in Denver. We posted them on the show. He has some damn good runs that he's capable of. I just wonder, maybe we see with Dak at this age, or Javonte coming off multiple injuries, you're not going to have it every day. Some days as you get older as an athlete, your body still has it. It's like, let's go. I feel 24.
I mean, that was clear with Dak today. I mean, there were a few plays where he looked like he was in slow motion, particularly on the move, and he darted a ball where you want to say, oh, hey, let's give kudos. Defense is getting paid too. Sam Williams read his keys and made a play, but it looked like he was in quicksand. Dak, meaning right from the snap. And as you go through some of this stuff and you think about projecting it, Miles Sanders might have a soft tissue injury and be out for a couple weeks. Jaden Blue's a rookie. He's going to hit a wall. You look at all the different things that are going to take place over the course of a long season. And it's probably going to take 2 or 3 guys. It's probably going to take all 3 of these guys, or Turpin taking, or Ceedee with the Flies and the Jets. And, it's going to take a village, right, to run this game.
Yes, it is. And, maybe between Elum, the offensive lineman Thomas, Perry and Winfrey emerging, maybe we're starting to get a nice enough collection to give you a little bit of confidence, right, that this team could make a leap this year.
Well, the depth piece of it is interesting, where you everyone thinks, okay, depth means, all right, we have this wide receiver who's this height, this weight, this speed, or this center in basketball, or a starting pitcher. Pick your sport and pick the position. Just because you replace a guy with another guy who's good doesn't mean he can do what that guy could do. But that doesn't mean, even though it's not 1-to-1, it's not the same thing, that what that guy doesn't bring doesn't complement or plus up the team in another way. And what's interesting about the left tackle, left guard conversation, and Tyler Smith and how this thing's going to play out with Tyler Guyton in the next 4 to 6 weeks, but also the 4 to 6 weeks beyond that. And why I was so hell-bent on saying Tyler Smith needs to stay at guard, because then all they have to solve is tackle, is that now what that tackle is and what it is not. Mm-hmm. You can plan and scheme and do things around that. Then when you get Guyton back and you ramp him up and you're playing those guys off of each other, it's the same conversation we're having with Blue and Williams, right? Because if one of those guys can do one thing really well and you play to that strength and they give you a little bit of this thing, and maybe the other guy's a completely different player, but if they can just give you that little pulse point so that there's something the other team has to scout, be aware of, be prepared for, then the scheme that we talk about, where he wants to be so diverse and multiple, right? Where if they've got 4 key pass plays or 4 key run concepts, it's 23, it's 25%. It's 23, it's 25%. They're not coming out in 11 personnel 97% of the time, like Peyton Manning with Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne, and whoever's back there at running back, and Dallas Clark, right? Where exactly what you're going to get. They want to be multiple and they want to move guys around, and that's the thing that's so exciting, is that what's the read key, what's the bead, right? What's the dot, like you were talking about, and where are you moving that? And right now, you would think that the Cowboys defense would just be swimming. So when you see a Sam Williams read his keys and make a play, to me, it's less about Dak maybe being a little bit slow today and maybe probably needed a Veterans Day off, and more about, damn, that Sam Williams going to be a player.
He is. And, we'll get Schotty on Thomas here in just a second, but watching Thomas today, listening to people talk about what he's good at, ran some audio from Will McClay. He was on last week with the KNC Masterpiece and said, this guy moves people, and what you need is a people mover if you want to win. I think it's possible Rob Thomas has ability to help the football team, like what you were just talking about right there. What can you do to help the football team? What can you do to make the team, the opposition prepare for you? His power in the run game, his ability to combo up with Tyler Smith, you are looking at like a world's strongest man between those two. Like
sure, Mariusz Pudzianowski,
incredible play strength.
Yeah. And that's the thing where Tyler Smith, just like CeeDee Lamb, like those guys, they're 11 out of 10 no notes, and you're still going to get more from them because we're going to see CeeDee go deep, and we're going to see Tyler Smith take it to that Zach Martin level. And he still has it, as good as he is at number 2 in the league. He still has another level to go to get to number 1 and then be unquestioned.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, and don't get me wrong. Maybe I misspoke there. I think Guyton is the significantly better long-term prospect.
Sure, better athlete.
But his pass pro is suspect. I don't know if Thomas is better, or he might be worse than him. But Guyton doesn't have the upper body strength. He moves great and he's big. So they're excited about what he can do in the run game. But when you talk about a guy snapping into you and potentially having a standoff with some of the best defensive linemen in the NFL, I think that's Thomas. And now you go Thomas, and you go Tyler, and you go Beebe, and you go Booker. Dude, I'll take those 4 in a brawl against any line in the NFL.
The blessing in disguise, if an injury can ever be that, is that if this goes the way that we're thinking it's going to go, and it's a little bit more smash mouth, a little bit more in your face, a little bit more brute force trauma from the offense to start, and then Guyton comes back, now you have you can ease Guyton along. So if he's not really comfortable, you're not rushing a guy back from injury early or asking a guy who's not right to pretend that he is. But at the same time, when he is, then you have that extra athleticism, the pin and pull stuff, and all the stuff we're seeing with the jumbo stuff. Who's to say that when Guyton gets back, he doesn't become like the move lineman, the 6th lineman, where this is the thing that is so, trying not to get too far ahead. Right. It's week 2. There's 4 more weeks of this, and then week 1's the big showdown, and there's going to be a reaction to whatever happens there. They win, we're talking Super Bowl. They lose, sky is falling. Yeah. It's a long season.
It is.
And what's really cool about right now is that there's a ton to be excited about, and it exists within every room on the team.
It does, man. I mean, you could have a situation where Thomas is goal line. Thomas is short
Absolutely.
yardage, and that sort of allows Guyton to get in that weight room, maybe get a little help from a pharmacist or something.
My goodness, you took it there.
Yeah, we need. Can he bench 250? You think with those arms and that muscle?
You're talking. This is the Kevin Durant conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the long arms. I don't know. Okay, play of the day probably. Let's move on from that. Play of the day probably the Holden catch. Undrafted wide receiver out of Oregon. Cowboys' new wide receiver coach recommended him, and after the draft, the Cowboys were able to get him. Reading his scouting profile, watching what he was able to do at Oregon, couldn't get open, or couldn't create separation. Right, this play was unbelievable. He got a little bit of separation. He got behind the defense, but the ability to go up. Now I can see how a guy who lacked the ability to separate, even in college, was still a very productive guy.
So one of the things that's really interesting about this, before we even talk about Holden, is did you notice the route he ran was the same one that CeeDee went viral for on air the other day? So he was in the same position, and he ran the same. It's like basically a stick nod, stutter go. And the reason it becomes one-handed is because he didn't have separation. He wasn't open.
Yeah.
You throw that ball high because your guy knows it's coming and he's going to go get it. That's where you're 35, 33 and a half to 35, 37, whatever the vert is, depending on which one of these guys you're talking about. The thing that's really interesting about him is when you go back and look at it, he was a different player at Oregon than he was at Alabama. And you remember at Alabama, he's behind Mechie, he's behind J-Mo, and that's before you talk about Gibbs and all these other guys in the backfield or the tight end room. And then you get to Oregon, and those guys Tez Johnson has a role, right? Evan Stewart has a role. The tight ends, the running backs are catching 50 balls apiece. The thing that was interesting about him at Oregon is he goes from being like a 12, 13 yard a catch guy to averaging 16 yards a catch. So like the massive volume isn't there, but he really made the most out of those opportunities. And that's what this kid's doing in camp right now. When you're UDFA, just because your college coach is along for the ride, or maybe he brought you with him to give you a shot, you know more, you still got to go out there and do it. And the best part about this kid's day is as spectacular as the one-handed catch was, he had a second touchdown later where they ostensibly ran what would be a CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens pick concept to him for him. He beat his man. He made the catch. He got a second tutty, in the same session. I mean, the kid was really, really good today.
Okay, before we get to the full timeline of the skirmishes, the punch, the player ejected, Schotty losing his bleep with the players, and why I think he's going to be the guy to lead the Cowboys back on deep postseason runs, I did want to get your thoughts on the Lamb and Pickens touchdowns that really highlighted the opening of the team portion.
The jump ball one was so exciting, and then you go, oh, okay, well, that was Pickens' shot. He's done for this. Now they're going to go find CeeDee, and they came right back to him. They brought CeeDee in motion. They lined him up stacked, and CeeDee was open too. And Dak threw a perfect ball. CeeDee went back to back, or GP went back to back, and
Dak was on fire today. I know he had the pick, but wow, put on a show.
He was putting the ball wherever he wanted to put it, and with pace and also with touch. I mean, whatever the situation required. The one that he threw to CeeDee is more obvious because it's a deeper route. The throw to GP, and you can see it, our angle's a little bit higher than some of the guys who are right there in the end zone where it happens right in front of you and it's literally coming into your living room. That ball had to be perfect because it's going to carry him out of bounds. If it's not, you put too much touch on it, he's out of bounds. You put too much of a line on it and it gets picked off. So it was really neat to see him, just play in and out based on, whatever the situation demanded. And both him and Milton looking for Fergie too. I mean, Fergie was really good today as well.
Yeah, I love it. I love them working on their passing game in the red zone, because that's been a major problem. Like throughout Dak's career, if they could not run it into the end zone, they were often settling for field goals. CeeDee afterwards at the presser said, I don't know how often we're going to get man coverage in the red zone, but I would imagine if either one of them is manned up pre-snap,
it's
we're
automatic.
checking out and going to them, right?
It's automatic. And some of the checks today, Dak reset, Dak moved, Dak was in complete control, but so was Joe Milton. And that was really neat to see where there was one time where they went to the line, the play clock was winding down, they reset, they came back, he still changed. So you talk about being stubborn. Right, because you want to get people into the right play, you want to get the right stuff on tape so you can learn from it, and even maybe you talk about taking a 5-yard penalty, but if the 5-yard penalty becomes 6 points, we're having the right conversation. And for both of those guys playing on time and on target today, opposite the one, maybe miscommunication, maybe me making up, stories that someone's whispering in his ear saying let Kyer
theory
make a chance or give him a chance, but when you go from tempo and then you're playing in and out of tempo and you're kind of doing conditioning within a practice, to see these guys rotate through and every running back going, oh, okay, that guy made a play, now I got to go make a play. GP made a play, now CD's, I got to make a play. Those two made a play, now Fergie's like, now it's my turn. So when your number gets called, you better squeeze that ball.
All righty. It's How About Wow here. Hit the like button. Please sub, if you haven't, and hit that bell button. How About Wow brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. There's a sign-up link in the description for you. Full timeline of the fights or the skirmishes. The question for me is, how perfect is Schottenheimer? Leave a comment down below if you're believing in this guy as much as I am. We'll check on New Bear here in just a second. But the first thing that happened is you had this little skirmish, and Schotty was annoyed by this. He said, I think during the second practice of camp so far, going back to last weekend, he said, next person that throws a punch, you're kicked out. Well, we hadn't had, fights. Well, after the skirmish, and I couldn't tell where the punch was thrown, it was a Johnny Cornelius, the bad actor. Schotty made good on the threat to kick anybody out of practice for throwing a punch, and he was gone. But even after dude got kicked out, they kept skirmishing, okay? There were actually two more. Schotty lost his stuff for the second time at Cowboys training camp. Hilarious. I hope you can hear some of this. But what he said in there, you want to fight? Let's bleep and fight. Get your ass on the sideline. And he was talking about fighting each other in wind sprints. And this is crucial, because on a team that has Jerry Jones as the owner and general manager, who's going to be on the radio twice every week and talking post game and letting anybody that cares knows this is my toy, right? And the players know if you want to make something happen, you come to me. Well, how do you still get players to listen to you? Right? As the owner and GM, the biggest celebrity in the NFL is actively undermining your authority. It's to create consequences where Jerry Jones isn't. And there's nothing in sports that speaks louder than, I will make you so freaking tired, you're going to feel like your lungs are exploding. It doesn't matter how old the athlete is. That's misery, makes a coward out of everybody, and I think creates real discipline in the moment.
Can I just tell you, though, that I leaned over to a guy in the crowd and I said, are they timing these guys with a sundial? Like, if this is how gassers were going to be run, I think I could still be out there, maybe not playing, but at least doing the conditioning work. I mean, they were dead. Their legs were jello. The conditioning within a practice, the accumulation of reps, the almost treating the whole day like a 2-minute drill. But when they were getting punished, I mean, they had nothing left to give. And the second part of this, from an accountability and a discipline perspective, the immediate thought I had was, okay, well, that's interesting if it's a guy that you have to Google. But when Micah comes back and that grizzly old bear is maybe in need of a haircut and a shave and a few days of getting back in football shape, and he's getting ornery and he throws a punch, is it going to go to that level? Like, are we going to take it that serious? Because, one of the things that's going to be interesting when that contract, the ink on that contract finally dries, is it's going to be a matter of time before he's knocking heads. But he's also going to come in saying, I've been watching this, I've been seeing this, you need to work. He's going to start pushing guys, he's going to start pushing buttons, and then someone's going to push his.
What do you think works better when you got a superstar that's not acting right? Do you go with Belichick, everybody's equal, or do you go with Jimmy Johnson, I don't have the same rules for all players?
Yeah, I think every locker room's different, right? One of the things that I was just thinking about was even the fun parent is going to hit you with there's limits to my love, like you're going to go through this thing, and whether this is maybe to steal a little bit of your thunder and a thought that I know you've shared before about, is some of this really and truly about George Pickens? And, you go through this and you say, well, hey, if we're going to be real, if we're going to really talk about this, George Pickens is only fighting people because he doesn't get the ball and he loses.
Yes.
I think George Pickens is one of those guys, if he has 1 for 7 because Ceedee goes off, he's going to be fine. He's going to be like, I want the Schotty, I want the ball next week, right? Yeah. But, I mean, as long as they're getting dubs and you can feed me in the next round, I think everything will be fine.
I mean, you've been in Pittsburgh. You've been watching George Pickens. He made a hell of an impression on us in the our mobile studio the other day on the tennis courts. I'm just a huge fan of George Pickens, the guy. I think away from football, he's great, right? But in the context of losing your stuff and doing something that's not in the best interest of the team, there were multiple situations in Pittsburgh, and it always felt like it was in the air and it was possible. And I imagine as a coach, not knowing, right, when that next George Pickens moment that could cost you a chance to win the game is going to happen. Do you think if Schotty kicked him out of practice or kicked him out of a game, like you're not playing again, do you think that would change how George Pickens reacts in that moment? He's just 24, right? And not until 25 years old is the human brain fully developed and capable of managing and regulating its emotions.
Hashtag science.
I think we got to give it another 12 months and give George Pickens the benefit of the doubt on age, but he does lead the league in not being able to control himself when he's pissed that he's not getting the ball and you're losing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that was really interesting about today is there were plays where Ceedee was open too. And there were plays where Ceedee was open too and they were on the same side of the field. They're in the same progression. And you're looking and you're just like, and he threw to Ceedee every time. There's a tremendous amount of intent around George Pickens right now. So I would fully buy into this as a siren song that we're not even going to let that mess even start.
All right. I love that. Yeah. And I think it's brilliant management because it's not putting a spotlight on George Pickens, the new guy who's a bad guy.
We're talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about
engagement farming
from a team perspective. What you're doing as Brian Schottenheimer, you're making this a team issue. Right? Yeah, I'm going to praise individually. I'm going to correct on a grand scale. That way, you don't have to feel singled out or like I'm making this reality that you've created for yourself worse. Because I'll tell you this, we got a message from the Cowboys PR department. George Pickens doesn't want to talk about how things went bad in Pittsburgh and all the different things. So I don't think it's something that George Pickens likes being out there or having to address or having people talk about. It's one of those things where a big league manager that gets kicked out of the game 15 times in a season, every time in the post game he's like, man, I'm embarrassed. I shouldn't act like that. Kids are watching. My wife texted me and said, honey, you lost it again. Not cool. But what's going to happen the next time the ump blows a call on the corner? He's going to do it again, go out there, kick dirt, get thrown out, and say the same thing post game. Like, some competitors just have a toxic relationship with winning. I think George Pickens is one, but if anybody can get it right, I think it's Schotty.
Yeah, and as you look at the waterfall effect across the rest of it, you could clearly see that they even turned the tempo up even further.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, it was like a 2-minute drill throughout the entirety of the day. But when you really think about how that stuff adds up, now you're getting more reps. You're finding out how guys are performing under pressure. You're finding out how guys can play when they're tired, right? Because if you're in the fourth quarter of a game, you're down 2 touchdowns, you score, the defense goes 3 and out, and you're right back out there. That's hard. And you go through these drills. I mean, that was the thing that was interesting about the rotation and guys getting their number called, right? Because all 3 running backs saw touches. We saw guys, undrafted free agents, catching multiple touchdown passes today. And they took the entire roster into account and put them into effect throughout the course of the day. And even with that, it still took its toll.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, speaking of great stuff, CeeDee Lamb's reaction to the fight here at the presser after practice, and DLLS made a nice little short out of it. So salute to them for the work.
Tremendous work they do.
It's been a while. It's been a while, but I feel like that was really necessary. I honestly like what he's doing because we need discipline. We need to be able to go through that line. You know what I'm saying? We need to have that availability towards the team and then that aggressiveness at the same time to be able to be as mad and fight between the whistles, and then as soon as the whistle's done, like, we're going to line it up again, so I'll see you next play type. We need to have that type of energy, not we're going to get it done right here, right now, like, no matter what. So shout out Schotty for that, but as for us, we just got to be the best group that we can.
Yeah, but, he talked in here about how it wasn't talent, it was discipline, that held the Cowboys back. And I'm thinking, you know what, you're right. There were some big flags in 21 and 22 against the Niners in the playoffs that maybe if you don't have those, you figure out a way to win, especially if Tony Pollard doesn't break his leg. But then you also look at the discipline angle of run fits, of gap discipline, and this Cowboys front has been horrible at that.
The selfishness.
Yes, the selfishness, right? So what he's talking about is everywhere we go, we got to put our team first, and you have to be able to develop this ability in practice in Oxnard, build the muscle memory and the emotional control to go right to that level, but then have that angel pop up on your shoulder and say, hey, we got to do everything through the filter of what's best for the team. And I wonder if you can get guys in that mindset right now, what other benefits it could have.
Well, and it's like an elastic band, because you're talking about elasticity between those two things. You have to be able to play on the edge. You have to have that controlled rage. And it's like, that's an oxymoron. You're literally telling me to go out there and play like my hair's on fire, and we don't know where the water's coming from, or even if there is a hose.
Yeah.
Right. And you go through this, then you go, what that means is when I actually hear the echo of a whistle, I don't punch my teammate in the face.
Yes. Okay, I love it. And I think Schottenheimer's the perfect Cowboys coach for the now. If I had to go back in time, of course, I would rather have a Landry or a Jimmy or, Bill Parcells.
But think about how different the era was. Could Jimmy coach the way he coached today? You're assuming he would adapt and he would.
Yeah.
But, Landry did adapt with schemes, but Landry didn't adapt as a personality, and that was ultimately what the times changed, and he didn't.
It's tough, because Rick Carlisle was ultimately run out as the Mavericks coach for not being able to adapt, and now he had tremendous amount of success with the Pacers. But there's rumblings that Turner wanted out because he's just. And Rick Carlisle has left a lot of players feeling offended and disrespected over the years. Would Jimmy react?
A lot of wins, though.
Yeah, a lot of wins, right? And I'm sure the GMs are happy, wherever they go. But at some point, you got to listen to your players and say, man, could we get better results with a change of pace? So I think Jimmy could work in the short term. Could he work long term? Master of psychology. And I bet he would figure out a way to understand this new generation better and adapt. Maybe be more of a backslap type of guy. But I am talking about how perfect Schotty is. I won't be surprised if he has as much success as his dad did, getting him to multiple conference championship games. Obviously, he's getting a much later start than Marty did. But, he's got the accountability and discipline part. But then you can also talk about what he did as a coach, hiring his staff, not hiring his friends. Can you imagine how ticked off you would be if like your best friends in coaching got the Cowboys job and didn't even call you. So Schotty's out here studying who's making the most with less in college and the pros.
Yep.
He gets Connor Riley, he gets Clayton Adams, and the schemes that we're seeing are in line with what the analytics and really what McVay and Shanahan have proven is going to give your offensive personnel an advantage on game day.
Flus is probably, you look, Clayton Adams and those guys, you know, when you talk about going from being a position coach to a coordinator, or you're talking about going from being a coordinator to a head coach and like on the rise and on that path, you know, Eberflus is one of those guys who's probably more of a coordinator than a CEO. That's just ultimately what we're hopefully going to find out, because what that would mean is this is a top 10 defense, top 10 in takeaways, and we're winning games because of the defense. It's not just Dak outscoring everybody. And what that then puts you in a position is to be a boomerang head coach again. But Eberflus is a guy who's come out and said, I want to be here. If this, maybe he even thinks maybe he never should have left in the first place. And, you know, you think about some of those things, you need that perspective. You talk about a change of pace. He got to change scenery. He got to change the scenery, and he got the promotions that came with it. And then he got everything else. Yeah. He got the worst roster in football and the worst salary cap, you know, and all the things that go with that. And the decisions that were made in that situation were hiring your friends. If you know anything about the Chicago situation, all those guys have the same agent. The rumblings there were that we were just hiring guys that we could hire because of the like mafia style way that, you know, there's like a little puppeteer type thing going on behind the scenes. This couldn't be more different than that. And what's really fascinating about it is I was going to make the 23 of me joke, because let's not forget who Marty Schottenheimer was, one of the most ornery dudes when everybody was ornery and football was a little bit different. And if anybody was going to, Nepo baby and all the things that have been fired at Brian Schottenheimer across the internet, if anybody was ever going to do that and have that card to play because that's what is in his blood, it would be him. And he didn't do it. That just speaks volumes about, you know, what's in your head, what's in your heart, which one's leading the way.
And a lot of that's influenced by dad, you know. But I think that's a tremendous point. Like, it's almost like Brian has just enough of Marty. You know, he's the younger version. Maybe he looked at how much of a red ass his dad was, and he said, I don't want to quite be that kind of coach. But under stress, enough of that Marty comes out to provide the discipline, I think. And,
you call it, it's trauma, the childhood trauma.
Yeah. Your childhood trauma comes out under stress, and I think that's happening for Brian Schottenheimer. But, man, there's so many different ways we can take that conversation. It's fascinating when you talk about Eberflus. Yeah, I think he was the perfect coordinator that got, you know, the head coaching job because he was so good at coaching defense. But what he found out is the same thing Wade Phillips found out.
Yeah.
You know, so many guys can't handle the stress. Like how he let all that time roll out in that his final game as a head coach. And in the post game, he's like, well, that's not my job. You know, that's the OC's job. Hello? You don't sit there and watch an OC mismanage the game and remove your chance to make the winning play.
Yeah.
You know?
All I can think about is he grew a beard and he became a great coach. Like it was one of the best memes or gifs or, you know, whatever you want to call it, you're going viral in any way, shape, or form. He did it, and it wasn't a good look.
No.
And for him to be able to take a step back and focus on the task at hand, that was one of the, after the tempo thing, what I saw all day was him in and out of drills. I saw him grabbing bags out of guys that were expected to play big roles on this team's hand, addressing the way they were holding the bag for their teammate in a drill.
He's brilliant at that. The details,
attention to detail,
the you know, the having everything buttoned up as a coach. But once you become a head coach, it's more about managing the game and managing people.
Well, because it's the whole team.
Yeah.
Right. He goes from just linebackers to the whole defense to the whole operation, and then you're talking about, you know, salary cap and what's on the buffet line and what hotel are we staying at.
Yeah.
You know, you're into all the weeds.
But I love what you said about Chicago there, because I think it's an opportunity for the Cowboys to recognize, like, there are mom and pop operations that are still out there, and Chicago's one of them, that they are what Cowboys fans fear the Joneses are.
Right.
Like, they're screwing up a lot more stuff.
Right.
The Joneses have built a good operation at drafting, at, you know, putting together a good salary cap approach to be even keeled and at least be respectable. Mm-hmm. But they do a couple of things wrong when it comes to free agency and, you know, how they structure their contracts and how they manage the salary cap that just prevent them from taking that next step. There is a whole cast of teams out there that really have no free.
Well, they can't even get on the ramp, right?
Yeah.
So the most fascinating thing about that conversation is the one you had yesterday with Steven, right? And when you talk about Jones fam, you know, you thank them for letting the flagship kind of, you talk about having the red ass. I mean, you have a little bit of that when it comes to attacking the P's and Q's of whatever the spreadsheet or, overthecap.com and anything that you find that's a fun little rabbit hole to go explore, especially when we come back to kicking the can on Dak's contract and the implications that has, or what they're going to do or not do with Micah, and how those two things become a domino effect, right? So one of the things that's really interesting about this time and this window right now is that they have some money, they have some injuries, they have some momentum, they have some setbacks, right? So there's hope and there's optimism, and there's big plays and there's highlights and there's YouTube going viral, but then there's also adversity. And today was probably the first real day where you felt that within the whole team, where you could say, here's how we're going to deal with that. Mm-hmm. We're going to run your ass, but before we run your ass, we're going to put you in a position where when we run your ass, you're going to be so damn tired, you're going to wish you were doing anything but playing football. And how they respond tomorrow is going to be a key. Like Dak looked slow at a couple points today. There was one of the clips that we were talking about, like, is this a half-speed rep? Like, did we say before this period where all day he's on time, he's on target, he's in rhythm, he's throwing laser cannon rocket balls, and then all of a sudden there's that moment where you're like, man, maybe he should have had a Veterans Day off. That was the only play or sequence of plays that you would have seen. So tomorrow, just as important as today.
And he's a guy that wants to be out there and be practicing, and I think it's important. But I think next year, once you have more familiarity with the system, that's when you start looking at the Veterans Day off that Tony Romo took quite often at this point in his career.
Hey, Joe Milton, you get all the fastballs.
Yeah, and we still haven't seen Will Greer. I mean, that's another topic. That's another video. Okay, here's Schotty's line of the day, and this is my favorite part, and maybe the icing on top of this take that I have. Leave a comment down below. Agree, disagree. Am I too bullish on Schotty? I'm coming in hot on him. But, he was asked here, how do you give young linemen an edge against the top defensive lines around the league? And his answer gives me confirmation that he's got, that upper level knowledge of really what it takes to get the dub here in pro football.
Yeah, we have all the tools that we need to be able to change things up. And at the end of the day, the best thing you can do for any offensive line, any team offense, when you're playing elite defensive linemen is pound the frickin' football, man. Just frickin', try to shove it up their ass. And that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to be physical.
Mike McCarthy gets that question, Newbear. He would say, well, we got to play to our strengths. We got Dak Prescott. We got Ceedee and George Pickens. Are you kidding me? So we're going to play to our strengths and we're going to pass the football. We need to make chunk plays. Go ask the AFC before 2000 how that goes. You know what I'm saying? Like, if what happened with Troy Aikman? Hey, why aren't his stats so freaking amazing? It's because he and Jimmy and Norv understood the path to victory is the chunk plays. But the best way to get those chunk plays is not to pass it 40 times a game, is to run it a lot more and convince them they have to commit resources closer to the line of scrimmage.
Sure.
That's when you get man. And today's NFL, the defenses are hoping and praying that you don't try to establish that run and pull them up, because they're sitting back here going, we're going to make you get 4 or 5 yards at a time and get 6 first downs. Right? So you got to build a running game that will guarantee that damn near. You want to have a 2016 Ezekiel Elliott running game that is taking first downs before you even get to third down.
Yeah, that's one of your favorite stats and one of your favorite proof points to always go back to. What that turns into is exactly what today was all about. You want to make a team tired. You want to take gut punch, kidney punch, all different things that go into, any analogy from any sport where you're working on someone's legs is go get 5 yards on first down and 3 yards on second down and pick up the first down on third. Yeah. Or when you're put in that position and Dak can go get 8 when it's 3rd and 7 every once in a while. Or what we saw today out of Javonte Williams, which is so encouraging, where he doesn't look like a check down guy right now. He's got a little more juice than I think anybody thought, especially Sean Payton. Mm-hmm. And, if he can be a guy where every time Jaden Blue comes into the game, it's not just, oh, hey, 34, screen, draw, rail routes. Like something's happening because it's a different dude.
Yeah.
And then, oh, by the way, here's this guy that you're expecting to just keep Dak clean and he can go make a play. Everything changes.
Mm-hmm. It does. And we're looking forward to how that continues to evolve tomorrow. The pads come back on, New Bear. You'll be out there on the sidelines tracking all the big plays. We want to get people following over there on Twitter at How About Wow and YouTube at How About Wow. And while you're at it, TikTok, we haven't been uploading as much. We got some content on there for you as well at How About Wow Cowboys.
Yeah, the Instagram's at How About Wow. We're How About Wow everywhere except for TikTok because they banned us before we ever posted, if we're going to be real about it. And then
that was crazy.
You threw the new one up before we could even argue with them about it. No, but it's a fascinating day. You know, I'm a lobster claw, and I'm looking forward to, you know, fighting the good fight and getting back out there from a better angle for you guys tomorrow.
Cannot wait. For New Bear, I'm Dawson. And until next time, how about wow?